You might find yourself relating to this idea. You end up waking up one day and you're thinking to yourself, you know what, today is the day that I get started in the gym. You'll end up doing a ton of research to learn what is the best thing for you to be doing, what is the best split to do, and should you be doing cardio at all. After doing all of your research on YouTube over the last 2 days and completely, definitely not wasting your time, you end up loading up your calendar to then put in 6 days worth of workouts in there and dedicate a couple days a week to cardio. But then you realize, well, you've created your calendar, but you need to be looking your best and also having the best meals and everything. So after spending, £60 here, £80 there, and you end up getting your first bit of vanilla ice cream protein powder, you're now ready to truly get into the gym. But wait, I did mention there that you also needed the outfit. So again, you go off and you spend another £150 on gym clothing and running shoes, and now you are truly ready to get into the gym. However, after the first week, you end up stopping. You give up, and you don't understand what went wrong. You planned everything out, and understood as much theory as you could possibly do towards this, so why did you end up going into this slump? You're putting off a task that you know you should 100% be doing right now by overthinking and over-planning what that actual task is. You might have found this happen to you many times before. It certainly happened to me plenty of times. So in this video, we're going to talk about action faking, chronically over-planning, and how I resolved it. The reason why this video even ended up becoming a thing in the first place was because of Notion. I started trying to figure out what I wanted to do with Notion and build off effectively a second brain, as they always call it in the productivity space. But through using Notion, I did end up finding myself just falling off of the want to use it load, because a lot of people always recommend it within the space of productivity and self-improvement. However, for me, it just didn't, and that could be because obviously my lack of knowledge towards the software itself, but also what I realized later on down the line and that you'll find out in this video. But obviously the main reason why I ended up wanting to use Notion in the first place was because I wanted one place to consolidate everything I wanted to do in life, and that basically spans across many different aspects, primarily productivity, which you'll find out more of. Now, what I found myself doing quite often is I'd have Notion right here as pretty much the main pivotal point, obviously, of building up this version of myself that was overly productive. And it would span into a couple different things. My first idea was to have a habit tracker. And then obviously from that, you'd have things like, journaling. Other people might have things like reading on that list. I don't have reading on this list as a habit, purely because personally, I don't find myself needing to remember as a habit per se, as I don't view it as a habit. I kind of view it as something that adds on an additional value to my life. I don't know, it's kind of weird to say. But also other people might have things like working out on that list as well. Also, don't mind my handwriting. My handwriting is awful, so it isn't something to be surprised about. Then obviously I had something like my calendar come up. This is something that I was really wanting to do quite often, mainly because I wanted to have everything consolidated in one place, like I said again. However, there's no proper way of making an Apple Calendar work on Notion. I also then wanted a to-do list. I also wanted to get a reading list on there as well, as that was something that I was really interested in, which also kind of would be connected, but in its own way, its own separate thing, so both of them will be connected here, which was this idea of having somewhere where I could note down all of my things that I'd learned from reading and other areas such as podcasts. Then outside of that as well, I wanted to have somewhere to have all of my YouTube stuff, which would also go into, other things such as ideas, scripts, and other things just like the process of it all, basically. I then wanted an extra area for mood boards, and this is something that I'll talk about in a bit, and it basically overall, because I wanted a mood board for some reason. I'll just discuss that in a bit, but I also wanted to have an area kind of like a mood board for clothes shopping, and as well as that, future tech ideas and that sort of thing. And the last main section that I wanted to have was this other area that would be dedicated to the future me. And we'll go into all of these different areas in a moment, but most of them I do think speaks for themselves. But when I was in the process of making my habit tracker, I realized that I was spending a load of time, as in I literally spent 3 hours trying to learn Notion and all these different things of how to build the habit tracker, just the habit tracker, nothing else. That in reality, I wasn't learning that much, nothing was truly sticking, and I don't actually care about it, really. I'm trying to create an overly productive way of organizing my life that really I wasn't going to be utilizing the full system properly. But not only that, many parts of this truly was not something that I cared about, and it wasn't going to actually add value to me. Pretty much by doing this and trying to create this Notion thing, it made me realize that I don't need something like Notion. I don't need a system that has everything all in one for the sake of it all being in one place. As for me anyway, I don't really care about the fact that I can just, click my calendar app and load up my calendar, quickly put the word docs into my Google search bar and immediately be brought to where I script videos. I don't have an issue with those things. So I was kind of trying to solve a problem that was never there in the first place. Now, why does this actually matter? Well, the primary reason is because I'm trying to add extra layers to my life that I know I just won't use and utilize properly in the first place. And secondly, in doing so, I actually know that this is something that I'm just doing that adds no extra value to my life in any way. It doesn't change much from what I'm already doing. I find that a lot of people who talk about wanting to use Notion all of the time, they kind of have this weird sense of belief that effectively Notion will solve all of your life's issues and make you the most productive version of yourself possible. However, all of them always are selling a template of some sort. But overall, I don't actually have an issue with that. Primarily for me, I do think that a lot of people who do use Notion can find great value in it, and I do think it can solve a lot of issues when it comes to productivity and having everything in one collective space. However, there is a massive learning curve to learning how to use Notion, which is effectively the over-planning stage of this. You are over-planning how to be more productive instead of just doing things and actually being productive in the first place. We'll go through what I talked about just a moment ago and go through every single version of what I already use that it's not replacing or doing any better than. First up, we've got a habit tracker. Now overall, I have no reason to actually use this outside of wanting to tick boxes and feel validated in myself that, okay cool, I've ticked some boxes, it means that I'm being productive. Pretty much all the time, whenever I'm wanting to build up a habit, I'm either putting it in my calendar or it's at the back of my mind constantly to the point where it's just basically nagging away at me and I'm just going to do it anyway. So that's kind of what works for me anyway. That's just kind of how my brain is wired. But obviously, if a habit tracker works for you, that's great. But all in all, for myself, I see no other purpose of having a habit tracker in something like Notion, really, besides wanting to tick the box. Then you've got a calendar within Notion, which to be honest, completely just unnecessary. There's no point. If I've already got a calendar that works, why do I need it in Notion? Then next up is a to-do list, which is something that I've wanted to be in and out of like, okay, cool, I really want to do a to-do list. So I've tried using digital ones, I've tried using physical ones. However, most of the time, my to-do list just ends up representing whatever my calendar already says. So I've found that what works for me is just not having a to-do list at all and just using my calendar for it as well. There's no real point for me of just trying to, have it as a to-do list as its own separate thing. Might as well just dedicate the time for it and just do it and get it out of the way, have it in the calendar so it's ready to be done. So again, it was kind of an unnecessary thing for me. I've tried doing it digitally, I've tried doing it physically. Neither one really works for me. Then mood boards are next, which is something that I've kind of found really interesting. I find the concept of a mood board interesting. However, I've never utilized it. I don't care about doing it. It's not something that I actively do. The closest thing I've ever done to a mood board is literally when I was going to build this setup. I wanted it to look a specific way. However, pretty much all of it was because of loads of videos that I'd already watched prior, and I'd basically built up this idea in my head of, okay, cool, this is how I want it to look. This is exactly what I want. I want it to be the darker wood. I want to have the grey desk mat. I want everything else to kind of be black, white, and so on. Like, all of that works for me, and I kind of already had it in my head. There was no need for a mood board for it. So again, kind of a unnecessary thing to add in there for no particular gain or any reason that's actually productive. Then YouTube videos. This is something that I did try to do a while back. However, I didn't end up sticking to it. I used it for about 2 months and I was really struggling after that, purely because I was becoming overwhelmed by effectively doom scrolling all of the list of ideas that I had of content that I had in the works. I then had all of it, literally everything being made within Notion, and it was okay, it worked. I could understand why people would use it, but for me, I prefer using Google Docs than using Notion. It's just easier to use all around, works better than Notion for writing up scripts anyway, and as well as that, I could zoom in. Again, I don't know if this is something that you can do in Notion, but if you can, I'm just dumb. But for myself, I just found it a lot easier just to use Google Docs, so I went back to it. However, the areas that I did actually use Notion in the end was for 4 main key things. One was my book list. I wanted to have a reading list and somewhere to put all of it, because I've got plenty of books on the bookshelf of, okay, cool, I want to read this, but I wanted to have an actual organized method of basically saying, okay, what books do I want to read? And then based off of a 1 to 5 answer, which ones do I really want to read? And going through the different genres of books as well. And then I wanted an another section specifically for book notes, and as well as that, just having a place to collect all of my ideas that I'm learning through different avenues. For example, through reading as the main one, which is why it would be book notes. Another one would be things like podcasts, YouTube videos, and so on. Just having a collective space to house everything, so that if I ever need it again, or it's other information that I'm kind of thinking about, I'm like, where did I think about this? Where did I get it from? I can just go back to this and find the exact source or the exact thing that I'm thinking about. Then you've got the shopping section, which houses clothes and as well as that tech, as those two things are the main things that I kind of want to focus on kind of improving over time. Clothes wise, purely because I wear too much just black hoodies all the time. That's pretty much all I ever wear, and generally speaking, either my clothes have got holes in them or they just don't look good on me anymore. So I want to find other things to eventually look at buying, some kind of housing it all there to basically consolidate all of the things of, cool, what do I actually want to wear in the future? And the same with tech, basically introducing me into more things, let's say like an everyday carry video later on in the future for this channel, and plenty of other things from new phones, new laptops, tablets, monitors, and so on. And the last section in my Notion is dedicated to the future me, which will have all of my goals, all of my things that I want to be doing, and the version of myself that I want to be like in the future, as this is something that I do heavily and I'm doing in my journal quite actively, and I'm effectively moving what I've got in my journal for this future me into this Notion area, so that every single day, if I want to, I can easily open up that section, read through that, and think, am I actually getting to that version of myself that I want to be at? But if you do want my overall video talking about my process of how I basically do everything productively, let me know and I'll actually make a full video discussing this, from Notion of what I use with what I just mentioned, all the way through to just my basics. I'll kind of go through a rough idea now so that you have an idea. Now, all of this was in the attempt to try and make my life even more productive, but in fact wasn't by any means. I was over planning and really trying to over prepare for something that really wasn't even a concern in the first place. I wanted to add productivities to areas that I didn't even care about anyway, but also I just started action faking many different areas. For example, trying to create a Notion sheet for habit tracking for 3 hours that I'm never going to use in the first place, but also I believe that I'm doing something productive in trying to build it. I was spending my time in a manner perceived to be productive, but in fact wasn't. It drew me away from my actual tasks at hand. I could have been doing anything else, such as just scripting a video. I could have been editing a video that I've got currently sat there needing to be edited, but I wasn't. I was doing something that I believed to be productive in a way to just procrastinate on doing other things. This is something that we do really often within the self-improvement and productivity side of the internet, and as well as that within reading. We end up reading and learning about all of these different ways to be more productive or to improve ourselves physically, mentally, whatever way it might be. We're doing all these different things, we're learning all these different outputs, however, we're just not doing any of them. We aren't taking into action of this, so we're doing something that we perceive to be productive. Which, sure, watching your first ever self-improvement video or watching a few productivity videos will be useful for the most part, but if you're not taking any of it into action, you're simply being a self-improvement and productivity honing junkie. What I found by trying to get rid of this overly productive version of myself and trying to be like an absurd version where I'm being productive 24/7 and I'm using Notion to track everything, even though I don't need to, actually made me less anxious overall, and I just found that generally speaking I was more productive with my back to basics of productivity, which really most people just need to use, whereas a lot of people kind of overdo it with many different aspects. When you go back to basics, you end up realizing that chasing this productive version of yourself that's just obscenely better isn't actually the best route for you. What it ends up doing more than anything is it just ends up stressing you out, and as well as that making you less happy. Now obviously, if Notion and all these other things work for you, then great. But honestly, I see a lot of people just chasing this super productive version of themselves, when in reality, one, most of the people that you're watching online aren't like that, but secondly, even if you get to this overly productive version of yourself, most likely you'll end up becoming burnt out in the end. My basic system is truly basic. If you were to look at it and compare it to literally a load of other productivity YouTubers out there, you'd probably think that I just don't know what I'm doing or anything, which probably I don't. But when it comes to my actual system, my main area that kind of consolidates everything about my life is my calendar. In my calendar, I effectively track my habits through that, because if it's a habit that I'm actually really wanting to do, I'll either have journaled about it actively, and that's pretty much constantly nagging in the back of my mind telling me, you need to go do this, you need to go do this, and it's constantly there, or I have it in my calendar as a dedicated little segment, so I'm always going to see it. But also, if let's say I want to go to the gym, then I've got all of that tracked in there. If I need to make some form of video, I need to do a script, record or edit anything, then it's always within there. And even for dedicated time outside of doing work-related tasks that would be deemed productive. For things like self-development time, which is what I've got it down on there as, which is basically dedicated time where I'll just focus on doing something that is developing me in some way, which could be learning something new, journaling, or it could be something as simple as reading a book. Outside of even things like productivity related, self-development, I'll even have things like pretty basic stuff like a movie night, for example. Me and my girlfriend on every single Friday will watch a film and just spend that time together. Because that way, then I have it always in there and it's not something like, okay, cool, I'm going to accidentally put I'm needing to record here, I need to edit here. I have it all blocked off properly and give myself enough time. If you want to actually see a full video talking about how to structure a calendar properly, then I will probably make that in the future at some point, effectively talking about time blocking and how that is actually a better move than trying to track every single second. So my calendar effectively works as a calendar, as prescribed, but also I actually use it as effectively my habit tracker. If I want to know how many times I've gone to the gym, I can just quickly glance through my calendar. It's all in there and it's very easy to see. Then when it comes to YouTube, instead of having everything within one, which I did try in the past, but it just didn't work for me in the long run, what I end up finding myself doing a lot of the time is I use this notebook right here to pretty much have all of my videos, everything within this. I've got literally a full list of every single video for my Exile channel, for example, for a whole year written down in this notebook. Personally, I just find it easier to use, and also when I come up with any ideas, any business related stuff, any creative work, it goes in here because I find that I remember it a lot more often, I care about it a lot more than just noting down the idea in my Apple Notes. And then outside of that, I have a basic file management system, which is really normal, very easy to use, and then outside of that as well, I use Google Docs to do all of my scripting, everything through that. So I'd rather do it that way because as well I can zoom in on Google Docs. I don't know if you can do it on Notion, but when I tried to use Notion for everything video creation, I ended up finding myself getting really stuck on that point where I was trying to record videos and I was like, I need to zoom in here, and I just couldn't. So don't try to make a system like everyone else's. Maybe try out some different things from different people. Try out different tips and tricks that you learn from all these different YouTubers. But if in your heart you know that this isn't actually going to work, then don't do it. If it's not going to add you extra value, then what's the point? Overall for me, I found that when I was trying to create my Notion system and effectively really just trying to overdo being productive and pretty much just doing something that I believed and perceived to be productive for like 3 hours of my day, when in reality I got basically nowhere in trying to do Notion, and in fact ended up being less productive by trying to do something that in my head was a productive task. So if deep down you know it's not going to work, just don't do it and actually focus on finding something that truly does work for you. I found generally that my easiest system of just pen and paper for most things, from journaling and as well video creation ideas, all of these different things, is what I prefer doing. I'd rather write it down and use a physical to-do list if I'm going to use one at all. That way I just remember things better and I end up doing them more actively and wanting to do them, because when I'm typing away at stuff, it's very easy just to type and then honestly forget what you've written like 10 minutes ago. Like I mentioned earlier with YouTube ideas, I found that when I tried to do it all within Notion and trying to be this really productive version where everything is all in one place and it's all consolidated here, actually made me less productive because I was becoming more overwhelmed by just looking at this massive list of ideas and all these different things. I found myself less inclined to care about what I was doing because it was all digital and everything. I was just looking at it like, okay, cool, here's my list of things to do. Yes, I could do that, or I could just close this tab and then move on to something else. And I just find that writing things down kind of gives me a level of accountability that I don't get through, let's say, a digital platform. Again, if it works for you, it works for you, but for me, it just doesn't. It was causing me way more anxiety than it really needed to be doing, so I had to drop it in the end. Truly, the main point of this video is telling you you don't need to be productive all the time. You also just need to find the system that works for you. Your system does not have to match what this other person is doing over here. There is no point of trying to match everyone else's systems when yours works perfectly fine for you. So stop aiming to be as productive as the people that you see online who are telling you how they're being productive 24/7 and effectively being productivity gods among just the normal heathens among us. Anyway, if you guys did enjoy this video and you like productivity and tech content, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as plenty more of this is to come later down the line. If you did enjoy this different style of video and I've tried to actually put a bit more effort into the video creation itself, then let me know in the comments section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.